whose work is renowned from coast to coast. Jonathan Hartgrove is the co author of White Poverty, and he has a lot to share with us about what took place in the last election and going forward. Jonathan, welcome to KBLA Talk 1580, and welcome to our audience all across the country.
Oh, thank you. It's a joy to be with you.
Jonathan,
I'm
share
just,
with us. I'm
I
sorry.
was going to tell you, I'm just coming off the streets of Raleigh, North Carolina, where I don't know if your audience is aware, but we had an, an interesting results from the election in North Carolina. Though, of course, Trump won nationally and in this state. Democrats actually took control of most of the statewide offices here in this election. And in response, the extremist legislature here has gone into an emergency session and passed a 130-page bill, most of which is about stripping powers from those who've just been elected to public office. So Moral Mondays are back on the streets in North Carolina and challenging that. There'll be a vote on Wednesday, so I encourage people to pay attention.
Jonathan, let's hang around that for a moment. You made it very clear that North Carolina was really the outlier state where Democrats actually did well. Progressives, students, the coalition of races and pain, if you will, came together and overwhelmingly voted for Democrats, but Donald Trump still won the state. Yeah. We did make tremendous gains in the state legislature and local offices, and yet you're saying that a extreme minority in the Congress or extreme majority in the state legislature has now sought to strip them of power.
Yeah, that's right. And this is not the first time. I was actually arrested in our state General Assembly in 2016 when the then extreme governor, Pat McCrory, the one-term Republican governor here, was voted out of office, and the legislature went also back into an emergency session then and moved to strip powers from the governor's office before Roy Cooper came into office. So it's a similar thing. This time there are more offices that they're trying to shift things. So it's a bizarre set of proposals. They want to move the oversight of future elections under the state auditor of all positions, because the state auditor is the only statewide official who is a Republican, so they want to put it under him.
Jonathan, there was this expectation, though, during the Harris campaign that we could turn a red state purple, that the very coalition that you and Dr. Barber and Moral Mondays has sought to build in the state where you've invested your time, in many areas it came together, but it did not lead to Democratic victory. Can you share with us what could have gone wrong?
Well, I think part of what's happening is these places aren't red states or blue states, frankly. They're states where there are more people who don't vote than there are people who vote for either party. And that was true in North Carolina this time. It was a smaller electorate than we had in 2020. And a lot of that is because people who we've been organizing and talking to, poor people and low-income people, really don't feel represented by either party. There's a great deal of frustration. And I think Democrats who want to win have to take that frustration seriously and speak directly to the issues of everyday people who are struggling to survive. Now, there are some things in even the Democratic platform that candidates could speak to. There's a commitment to raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. There's a commitment to raise the sub-minimum wage. I mean, I was just out there on the street with the Union of Southern Service Workers, all of whom are either restaurant workers or people who make less than a living wage, and would love to see something like that advocated by politicians. Unfortunately, from my perspective, we heard a lot more about lifting the middle class and attempts to explain rather complicated tax policy that really doesn't apply to many people who frankly don't have enough money to to deal with tax rebates at the end of the year.
When we come forward, we're going to be discussing white poverty. You need to get this book, How Exposing Myths About Race and Class Can Reconstruct American Democracy. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580. We are joined with Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, one of the co-authors of a masterpiece work that we need to study when we come forward.
You up to speed on the news of the day. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. only on KBLA Talk 1580. On behalf of her precious family, it is with profound sadness that KBLA Talk 1580 announces the passing of our beloved colleague, Robin Ayers, on Thursday, December 5th. Robin was a bright light. You could see her radiant smile through the radio. We all respected her immense talent, loved her jovial spirit, celebrated her love of family, and honored her faith in God. Our thoughts and prayers are with Robin's entire family, most especially her husband, Rob, and her twin daughters, Brooklyn and Madison. We ask you to join us in praying for the Ayers family as they navigate the difficult days ahead. In her honor, all this week, we're broadcasting the best of the Rob Report on KBLA Talk 1580. We're not just a thermometer recording and broadcasting popular opinion. We aim to be a thermostat, transforming the conversation about climate justice in our community. This is KBLA Talk 1580.
We're with Bridget, whose husband won't be home for months, and whose daughter is due any day. We're with Mike, who's leaving home to protect his family and yours. We're with all service members and their families who need community, connection, and maybe a bit of magic. Are you with them? Learn more at uso.org today.
What's that sound? That's the sound of Downy Unstoppable scent beads going into your washing machine and giving your clothes freshness that lasts all day long. There it is again. It's like music to your ears, or more like music to your nose. That freshness is irresistible. Let's get a Downy Unstoppables bottle shake. And now a sniff solo. Nice. With Downy Unstoppables, you just toss, wash, wow, for all-day freshness.
My mom has decided to learn to paint, and she's good.
My dad's now into creative cuisine, and I've already put on 6 pounds.
Learning new things comes with age.
My mom, she started forgetting my name and what we're talking about.
Forgetting well-known things doesn't. Memory loss may be a sign of Alzheimer's disease. Early detection gives you and your loved one time to plan for the future. Learn the warning signs of Alzheimer's at 10.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580. We are joined as our special guest, Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, who's the co-author of White Poverty, How Exposing Myths About Race and Class Can Reconstruct American Democracy. Dr. Hartgrove, I want you to take your time in our longest segment and share with us your research, Dr. Barber's research, and what it is that we've been missing about white poverty in America.
Well, my dear brother, Reverend Dr. Barber has, I think, brought an insight that has been a part of the freedom movement throughout U.S. history into the present by pointing out that white poverty is neglected because we racialize poverty. And when we racialize poverty, we keep people from seeing how broad its impact is. And in some ways, what what he's doing gets at the root of what race is. Race has been used over and over again as a convenient way to pit people against one another who have every reason to come together, and to challenge the economic injustice of our system. That was true during the time of the plantation economy. And the simplest way that the plantation owners found to keep poor white folks and poor black folks apart was to tell the white workers that they were better than the black workers simply because of the color of their skin. Of course, this has created all sorts of injustices, and racism is very real in its implications in our lives. So, in no way are we trying to dismiss race, but rather to deepen the analysis of race in order to help people see that more what Reverend Barber calls moral fusion, that is, bringing people together across these dividing lines, around a moral center of what is true and good and best for all people, is the key to building coalitions that can achieve a true multi-ethnic democracy. So that's the heart of what this book is about, and it was a great honor to work with him on it.
I want to share with you something that I'll admit, as a former public official and as the son of Jesse Jackson. In 1984 and 88, when my father ran for president, he talked about building a rainbow coalition. That's red, right. Yellow, brown, black, and white. Mm-hmm. A noble idea of moving people from racial battleground to economic common ground, and then on to moral higher ground, to use his language. Mm-hmm. But it was this campaign different. Now, I was in Congress for 17 years, mm-hmm. and in this particular climate, I share with my father, who, as you know, is struggling with Parkinson's, that maybe the racialized coalition isn't the proper approach, where the colors matter. Mm. But maybe we should be building a quilt based on pain patches. Mm. That is, our Jewish brothers and sisters experienced a painful event on October 7th. That was a very, very painful patch in their memory. And African-American men who've experienced mass incarceration, that's a very painful patch. Native Americans obviously have a pain patch, and women from Roe v. Wade to Brown versus the Board of Education. I was driving down, that's a pain patch. I was driving down interstate, the Pennsylvania Turnpike. My truck broke down, had to get off in Harrisburg, 3 days to get it fixed. Spent time in Lebanon and Lancaster and Gettysburg, and I saw the opioid crisis. Yeah. I also saw a sea of red, right? And I'm saying to myself, is the message of Democrats even reaching these people? I had campaigned in Philadelphia, campaigned in Pittsburgh, but as soon as I got off of the interstate, I think I saw, Reverend Hartgrove, white poverty. And I felt like even though my father's vision included them, it wasn't a message they were willing to hear. Reverend Barber has found a way to transcend the surface level of racial politics or even rainbow politics to go to a deeper level of moral fusion. Share that with us.
Well, I think what you're saying about pain is really important, and I mean it's essentially a pastoral instinct that Reverend Barber and your father share, one that has drawn them over the course of their lives to pay attention to the cries of people who are hurting. If you follow this, brown-skinned Palestinian Jew who I've dedicated my life to following, if you listen to the biblical prophets, you have to take seriously that every person created in the image of God, made for dignity and made with value, hurts when the broken systems of this world keep them from the basic things that they need. And as you just outlined so well, there are so many people who in various ways and in intersecting ways, feel this pain because of who they are. And what moral fusion politics has tried to do is to say that we cannot allow the identities that we might find because of our place in the world, and that often are connected to our pain. We can't allow those identities to separate us from the other people who we have to be united with if we're going to form a broad coalition that is determined to move together to higher ground. That's moral fusion policy. It doesn't deny anybody's identity. Everybody's a precious child of God. Everybody's identity matters. But so often those identities have been used and pitted against one another in ways that keep us from coming together and building the real political power that can make a difference. And I think what Reverend Barber has been able to do over the course of his public ministry is to respond to the pain by going to people, by going to where they are. And in White Poverty, we tell so many of the stories of the people we've met in places like where you describe in Western Pennsylvania, places in Eastern Kentucky and in West Virginia and in Western North Carolina, where I'm from. I mean, when I was a 17-year-old kid who had grown up, in rural North Carolina, Southern Baptist churches, had been caught up in, all of the narratives that are given in those places. I grew up in the religious right and in the way that they told us that, the only way to think about faith in public is whether somebody's for or against abortion. And yet that politics made our places poorer and hurt us because we lost so many essential government services. And Reverend Barber came and loved us, reached out to people in those places, said we can build something together. The theme song of our Poor People's Campaign that our sister Yara Allen wrote, "Somebody's been hurting my people and it's gone on far too long and we won't be silent anymore." We've sung that in every corner of this country, marching up and down streets. She wrote that in my home county after she listened to white people and black people whose water has been poisoned because the utility dumped coal ash in these ponds that leached into their well water for years. She heard that cry. This movement heard that cry and has said, if we listen to those cries and connect them with the cries of other people, the opioid crisis that you mentioned, which is not disconnected from the cries of, immigrant sisters and brothers on the streets down in El Paso, Texas, or folks whose kids have been gunned down in the streets of Detroit or in Philadelphia. That pain can bring us together and can help us to see that in some way we all hurt. We all hurt, and we have to work together in order to build a society where we can heal.
I think it's fascinating that as a co-creator with Dr. Barber in this moral movement, that you don't use the political parties, you don't use the labels of the Democrats or the labels of the Republicans or the social or economic constructs of liberalism or conservatism. You I don't even want to call it a politic. There seems to be an empathy factor here that is beyond political description, and it may even be beyond the description of the language itself, that the language itself may be too limiting. Dad used to tell the story of how Bobby Kennedy went to an urban community and held up a black baby, and the press was like, "Oh, wow, Bobby Kennedy is holding this poor black child." But then when he went to Appalachia and he held up a white child, America responded, "We have a poverty problem. There's a real problem in America. We can't imagine people living like this." And so I think on both sides of the reactionary politics of race, there is something that Dr. Barber and you have carved out that defies the labels, that defies posturing, defies imaging, defies the political consultants and constructs, where you look at the heart of the person who's actually talking, and there's this overwhelming empathy factor. Could you comment on that?
Well, we don't by any means want to deny the reality of politics because it's impacting people's lives. But I studied philosophy when I was in college. The 20th century philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, he said, "Words make worlds." I mean, Reverend Barber knows what the prophetic tradition says, that that how we speak conditions what we can imagine, right? And so movements are about imagining something beyond the options that we have. And I think everybody recognizes that we're in a mess in this country. Even many of my Republican sisters and brothers, the available options, politically speaking, on so many issues are not willing to come together to do the things that most Americans want, right? The vast majority of Americans, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, want to see living wages. People who work all week long to be able to afford a place to live. Um, the vast majority of Americans, I mean, we see this when these measures go on ballots as ballot measures, want better protection for workers, support unions, want to see access to health care for everyone. The vast majority of Americans want some sort of reasonable immigration reform, right? So that there's, not this gaping problem where we have, people who are here in necessary parts of our community, but are relegated to some kind of second class citizenship. So these are things that people share, but the available political options don't really give somebody, a single party to vote for or a lever to pull when they go into election. So we need movements that are willing to help us imagine something else, and that's what a moral agenda is always about saying that that things aren't possible until we articulate them, and when we articulate them, we can begin to work towards them, and that's why we've been building moral fusion coalitions around a moral agenda, and why this Poor People's Campaign that was relaunched in 2018 has, we've introduced in Congress, in the House, a resolution that outlines, a broad agenda for the kinds of legislation that would be needed to address these things. We're not at a place yet where we're, anywhere near having parties that can embrace that, but we want to make that real, and to make it real, we have to build that from the ground up. And I think that's the kind of imagination that that's so sorely needed, and that I pray more people can embrace as we see how dangerous it is to neglect these things, and what kind of leadership can emerge when you don't address people's real needs.
I'm so deeply rooted in Blue America that when I listen to you and Dr. Barber, sometimes I say there's more that I must do in Red America.
Mhm.
But then on the other hand, I don't have to go far, because the empathy and the moral fusion that you're talking about doesn't necessarily exist in Blue America either. It's not like I can run to something that we didn't win politically or electorally, but some of the problem is right here in the blue. And if I were in the red, I'd say, well, I feel like I should reach out to the blue, but I'd have to say to myself, there's still some problems right here in the red that keep me from reaching out to the blue. So when I take the colors away, blue and red, or Democrat and Republican, or liberal and conservative, in Dr. Barber's work, the Poor People's Campaign, the moral fusion work, the deliberate effort to be inclusive, I mean, I see authentic work that Dr. King himself had begun.
And it's sorely needed now. I mean, Dr. King was saying in '65 that that the sort of economic interests in this country were most afraid that poor Black and poor white folks would come together and form a voting bloc that could transform the country. I mean, I think we saw a reaction against the coalition of the civil and human rights and women's rights movements of the 1960s and 70s that have given us, this backlash of the Southern strategy and of what we, describe today as polarization, but is really the result of intentional efforts to pit people against one another along all sorts of cultural wedge issues, and that has brought us to a very dangerous place. And I think the kind of listening to our neighbors and to what people really care about that you were talking about is the only way forward out of that.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580. When we return, we will continue our conversation with Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, author of White Poverty: How Exposing Myths About Race and Class Can Reconstruct American Democracy, when we come forward.
You're riding with Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Tyreek Wynn with 4 things you should know from BIN News. President-elect Trump says children born in the U.S. could be deported if their parents are in the country illegally. In an interview with NBC's Meet the Press, Trump said he doesn't want to break up families. The Department of Justice is holding a virtual meeting to allow Memphis, Tennessee residents to discuss their thoughts on the Memphis Police Department. MPD officials and officers now stand accused of a pattern of behaviors that includes the use of excessive force. Jay-Z is accused of being in a civil lawsuit of the rape of a 13-year-old girl in 2000, allegedly along with fellow entertainment mogul Sean Diddy Combs. Saturday was a great night to check out Jupiter. The planet was at its brightest as it orbited close to the Earth and lied directly opposite of the sun. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
Hawthorne 405 southbound at Rosecrans. It's a stall blocking the carpool lane. Delays out of Inglewood, getting away from Century Boulevard. The northbound side of the 405, that is also slow moving out of Culver City from just about the 90 on the brakes as you continue all the way to the 5 merge heading into Sylmar. It's also a tough drive on the 5 southbound out of Burbank. Delays crowding up at Olive. Delays taking you ahead all the way to Lakewood Boulevard. Let's look at the 91 eastbound slowing out of Carson, leaving Avalon. You remain on the brakes and stretches all the way to Green River in Corona. Tough out of Ontario for the 10 eastbound from just about Euclid, and that drive is slow and stretches all the way into Calamasa.
Only at Lowe's, MVP's Pro Rewards members can get a volume discount on eligible orders as low as $1,500. Discount on eligible product only and reflected in quote. Restrictions apply. See Pro Desk for details. MVP's Pro Rewards program subject to terms.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Of the 12 schools selected for the NCAA Division I college football playoffs, only 2 have a black head coach. James Franklin at Penn State and Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. Franklin is in his 10th season at Penn State. The 52-year-old Franklin is the first black head coach in Division I to reach 100 career wins. In 2016, he was the first black head football coach to win the Big Ten Conference Championship. Penn State, 11-2 this season, has a first-round game against Southern Methodist on December 21st. The 38-year-old Freeman is in his 3rd year at Notre Dame. Notre Dame, 11-1 this season, plays Indiana in a first-round game on December 20th. The Black College Football National Championship will be decided this Saturday at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. Jackson State takes on South Carolina State in the Celebration Bowl. Live coverage on ABC at 9 a.m. Pacific Time. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Are you an entrepreneur looking to take your business to new heights? KBLA Talk 1580 is your partner in success. Every day, we celebrate and elevate Black-owned businesses across our community. Our KBLA SMB Marketplace currently features The Cookie Dip, Badass Bakes, Hair Concoction, Higher Education Accreditation Consulting, LACC Radiology Technology Department, and Malik Books. Your business deserves to be heard. Let KBLA Talk 1580 amplify your voice and connect you with our powerful community of listeners. Email smb@kbla1580.com today. That's smb@kbla1580.com. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Become a U.S. citizen with the help of the Los Angeles Public Library. Get free and confidential information on immigration and citizenship. Visit lapl.org/NAI to find your nearest library or call us at 213-228-7390. That's lapl.org/NAI or 213-228-7390 and start your path to becoming a U.S. citizen with the help of the Los Angeles Public Library. Call 213-228-7390 or visit lapl.org/NAI.
Are you tired of being stuck without internet access? Connect and go with LA County Library. It's simple. Visit your local LA County Library location and borrow a hotspot for free to get Wi-Fi wherever you are.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you, when we fight, we win. The Youth Justice Coalition is challenging America's addiction to incarceration and discrimination. YJC works to dismantle policies leading to mass incarceration, law enforcement violence, and the school-to-prison pipeline. Their approach, transformative justice, community intervention, free LA high school, legal defense, and system monitoring. YJC promotes safety without relying on prisons. Their goal, prevent system contact and help people exit the system through direct action, advocacy, and education. Want to get involved or need help? Call 323-235-4243. That's 323-235-4243. Join YJC in creating change. When we fight, we win. KBLA Talk 1580, your voice for justice. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580. We are joined with Reverend Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, one of the architects of the Moral Monday movement in North Carolina, the moral fusion politics, if you will, of William Barber. They picked up on the Poor People's Campaign of Martin Luther King Jr. and have transformed the entire nation and continue to transform not just the nation, but the spirit of the nation. And really, that's what I want to drive home with Dr. Hartgrove. I know who Donald Trump is, right? I listened to him for 4 years. I watched him tit for tat 4 years out of office. My mind already knows what to expect. Dr. Hartgrove,
you gotta give it to him. He's consistent.
He's absolutely. I'm coming down off of a tremendous high about the spirit that I felt from the Harris campaign, the smiles, the joy, the sense of togetherness, the Democratic convention. I haven't recovered from our loss, but clearly it wasn't enough. And I'm not trying to make this Democrat and Republican. I'm talking about the ethic of joy and the spirit she brought to the campaign. She also brought with her a middle-class value, a middle-class strategy, a middle-class tax cut, a middle-class housing, a middle-class values. And listening to you, I'm feeling like we missed something, that white poverty, that the least of these couldn't even hear our message. They couldn't even hear our words. How do we communicate with people, not for our own selfish political ends, but to get them to see that what we stand for, or maybe it is what they stand for, that they vote their own self-interests and not vote along, let's say, misogynistic or racial lines, which we may have witnessed in great measure in this past campaign.
Yeah. When people are desperate for change, they're vulnerable to all sorts of manipulations. I think that is true. I think we have to account for why so many people are so desperate for change. And that is really the main reason we wrote White Poverty. There is a poverty crisis in this country but it's rarely addressed as a crisis, right? It's even by the people who I do believe genuinely care about the problem, it's often seen as a sort of measured issue that we need to keep working on. You know, it's going to take some time. It's approached in this kind of reform framework. But for so many people, the gap between, you know, the folks who are getting by and doing okay and people who, as Howard Thurman used to say, live with their backs against the wall, people who really don't know if they're going to be able to make ends meet this month, which means they don't know if they're going to be able to feed their kids. They don't know if they're going to be able to, you know, get home from work in the car that they just drove to work, or they drove the car to work and they know they're going to have to sleep in it in the parking lot tonight because there's nowhere else to go. That's true for far more people than are acknowledged in our public life by any political party. And we wrote White Poverty because we wanted to say, in the great prophetic tradition, both of, you know, the ancient biblical prophets and the prophetic tradition of these United States, that until we listen to the cries of those people, we can't even imagine what sort of change is needed. And part of this is that we have to learn to look differently at what's happening. I mean, we drew on some research that was done at the University of California that shows that poverty is actually the fourth leading cause of death in this country. We don't talk about it that way. You know, we recognize the need to have, you know, massive investment in cancer research to, you know, to do what we can to try to address heart disease. But you know, it's only slightly below that, and you know, far above the numbers that die from pulmonary diseases, or that die from even gunshot wounds, which is a serious problem in this country. Nevertheless, far more people die from poverty than any of those things. So if 800 people are dying every day from poverty, it is an epidemic, in the same way that we had a public health crisis around COVID. We have a crisis around poverty, and so the first order of the day, we believe, is to talk about it as the crisis that it is, to genuinely grieve that we have become a people who allow so many of our neighbors, who are also in many cases our family and, you know, fellow church members, synagogue members, mosque members, to live in such dire conditions. And once we take that seriously, then I think we can ask, well, what kinds of transformation do we need? But like James Baldwin used to say, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. We have to begin by facing the reality of poverty.
In Michael Harrington's book, The Other America, he said that in America, we have the best dressed poverty on earth. Yeah. I saw that in Harrisburg. I saw lawyers dressed in their suits who had been addicted to some form of substance. They had no teeth on their way into the courtroom. And no one could tell them they weren't middle-class lawyers on their way to work. But clearly, they were in a different kind of poverty, a different kind of mental state. I mean, I saw the opioid crisis up close and personal, and I couldn't separate it from the crack crisis that we had in the African-American community. I mean, I saw the fentanyl crisis in eastern Pennsylvania, in Appalachia, no different than the cocaine crisis that we had in some of our communities. I mean, these communities have more in common than they do apart. And even when I was in prison, I saw, what Dad would call the exhaust pipe of our system, a system that had chewed them up in the engine of the economy, but it was men who needed medical care and needed housing and had lost hope, and who no longer had families. And they were as white as I was black. They were as brown as anyone was white or yellow. And they were all there together, bound by a common condition and a common, if you will, poverty of spirit. Yeah. A poverty of spirit that isn't just about a public policy,
Mm-hmm.
It isn't just about a new economic reform, although we need to transform the system economically to provide some of the gaps for hope.
Mm-hmm.
But there were some serious spiritual matters that I witnessed on my own personal journey that have attracted me so much to the empathetic side of this equation. That isn't just Black ghetto poverty in the ghetto. That I can't separate the ghetto from the trailer park. I can't separate health carelessness at Stroger Hospital or at Sinai in Los Angeles from what I saw in Pennsylvania with community health clinics closing and the absence of doctors and the absence of mammograms and the absence of a good neighbor policy. I mean,
in an economy that has treated people like things for so long, there are a whole lot of people who have felt the pain of rejection, and that is an overwhelming reality. I mean, when we describe the poverty as it exists in this country, it's awesome in its size. But the other side of that is that it also means that there are a whole lot of us who can come together, right? That if poor people can unite and form a coalition that votes in elections and that organizes between elections and that builds power around an agenda, there is an incredible power when the rejected come together. And that's what we've been trying to do with the Poor People's Campaign.
When we come forward with Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, we will share with you how to bring the nation together beyond race, beyond sex, and beyond class, but at the level of spirit.
You up to speed on the news of the day. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. only on KBLA Talk 1580.
This season, Chevy brings classic pairings, cookies and milk, mistletoe and kisses, and your holiday plans and a new Chevy. Silverado 1500 gives you power and capability with 430 pound-feet of torque to haul your holiday tree. The Equinox EV and all-new Equinox, America's best compact SUV for new vehicle quality by J.D. Power, offer both confidence and style to see you through the holiday season. It's easy to see why Chevy makes everything better and brighter. Find your red tag. Get 0% APR financing for 36 months on select popular Chevy models when you finance with GM Financial. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive. Award based on 2024 models. For J.D. Power 2024 U.S. Initial Quality Study award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Offer available on all 2025 Equinox and 2024 Equinox EV, Blazer EV, and Silverado EV models. Monthly payment is $27.78 for every $1,000 you finance. Example down payment is 26.8%. Must finance with GM Financial. Some customers may not qualify. Not available with lease and some other offers. Taking retail delivery by 1/2/25.
We asked seniors how to prevent Medicare scams.
My best advice, if you get a phone call, do not talk to the person. These people are well trained. Don't talk to them.
They don't know me. They're just trying to scam me.
Don't be fooled. Hang up. Just hang up.
Never give out your Medicare number.
They're going to get your number to put in a false claim.
If I get a call from someone, I don't pick up the phone. And should I pick up the phone and they ask for information, then I hang up.
How do you detect Medicare fraud?
Just like I check my credit card statements, I check my Medicare statements monthly.
Scammers can get a hold of your number, order medical devices through your account, and you're not even going to know about it if you don't look at your statement.
Check your statement every month.
If you get your statement and you see something that you know you did not have done, you report it.
Call your senior Medicare Patrol.
To report Medicare fraud, call the Senior Medicare Patrol at 855-613-7080.
Climate justice, climate equity, climate resilience. By any other name, we demand environmental justice in 2024 and beyond. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you that we keep us safe. Every girl deserves a chance to shine. That's the belief behind Forgiving for Living, Inc. Since 1999, this organization has been empowering at-risk girls ages 13 to 18, helping them overcome behavioral and mental health challenges. Founder Wendy Gladney's personal journey inspired the mission to give girls hope and purpose through the power of forgiveness. Through their ambassador program, workshops, and annual Annual Conference, Forgiving for Living has touched over 3,000 young lives, providing mentoring, life skills, training, and tools for building self-esteem and confidence. You can make a difference. Visit forgivingforliving.org to donate, volunteer, become a mentor, or find help for a young girl in need. Forgiving for Living, Inc., building brighter futures for young girls. Visit forgivingforliving.org today. This is a community call to action for
This is Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm joined with Reverend Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, who is one of the authors of White Poverty in America. And in that book, he discussed the myths of white poverty. And I asked him just before we went away to share with his thoughts on communicating with the American people at the level of spirit. And I say at the level of spirit when I use this example. My father, when I was growing up and through all of his ministry, it's really not known, but he spent a lot of time at hospitals visiting people. And I never understood why he would visit, let's say, columnists who had it out for him or wrote negative columns about him his entire career. And I should remember one such columnist here in the city of Chicago. And I asked my dad, why would you go visit this guy in the hospital? He said, and he said it from a very vulnerable place. He said, I came to understand that people are different when they are laying prone in a hospital bed than when they are standing on their own 2 feet.
Mama.
And he would go and he would pray with them. And from that time, when sometimes he would be the only person to visit them in the hospital, they never forgot the day that Jesse Jackson came and visited them in the hospital and prayed with them. And it transformed their friendship. I'll give you another example, Reverend Hartgrove. Dr. King was marching here in Chicago, and he got hit in the head with a brick. A white woman walked up and spit on him. And he looked up and he saw the white woman, and the white woman looked down at Dr. King, and she said some unkind things. I think it was in Marquette Park. He came back a week later, and they had another mark, a little less violent. And the white woman walked up and said to him, you know, Dr. King, the last time you were here a week ago, I spit on you. And Dr. King said to her, you are too far an attractive woman to have done that. And I said to myself when you spit on me that you couldn't have possibly been at your best self. Now, he could have left her in her head with a wrong, a moral wrong that she had committed against him in her life. But he absolved her of that wrong. And he allowed her to live the rest of her life having been forgiven for what she'd done by Dr. King. I say that to say that there are these moments in our culture, there are moments in our lives where the opportunity exists to transcend race. And I'm not so sure we meet people very often at the level of the spirit, but I certainly get the impression that's what your movement is about.
Well, at the level of the flesh, a lot of people have been hurt. And what people do when they're hurt is naturally we try to defend ourselves. But what you're pointing to is the great insight of nonviolence, which is that at the heart of the people who hurt us is usually an embrace of some kind of distortion, of some kind of lie, of these myths that we've tried to expose in this book. And to see through to the person and to recognize that if that person could be free from the lies that they believe, that they're more like me than they are unlike me. That's the key insight of the power of nonviolence. To believe that your enemy can be transformed because they're as human as you are. that's a powerful thing. It's certainly not easy, and we've seen the worst that people can do to one another. But I do think we're trying to remember that so much of the harm that happens is because we're not engaging one another as the human beings that we are. And so, if we have political systems that keep us from seeing one another as human beings, then we need movements that can change those systems, that can change the inequalities that are reinforced by the everyday practices of our lives. That's what movements can do. We've seen it in our past, and we know it's needed for our future. It doesn't happen overnight, and so it takes an incredible amount of commitment to build to a place where we have enough consensus that we can get change. But without it, I think we're headed to a very terrible and violent future. And so keeping hope is about continuing to give ourselves to the kind of work that allows us to imagine our neighbors as people like us, no matter how much real harm they've done. Because when people have been lied to and people believe lies about other people, we can and do hurt one another. Love is about the power to see people as human beings, even when we know people have done that kind of hurt.
You know, Dr. Hartgrove, I've always, I've never understood why I feel like that burden always falls on us on the question of nonviolence, whether it's Dr. William Barber or whether it's Reverend Jackson or whether it's Martin Luther King Jr. I feel like that burden, clearly it falls on you and Liz Theodardis. I mean, I can clearly feel that in your spirit, but I've also asked the question, why hasn't the white community produced a Martin Luther King Jr.? Why is there no advocate for poverty as popular amongst white Americans on the question of poverty that, for example, the clarity that Dr. King offered that's been received by African Americans on our side?
That's
Where's
fair
the moral
question.
authority and the moral leadership that we
It's a
claim
fair
to see on?
question. I mean, I think it has everything to do with the lie that race was, the lie that race is, in order to create a false identity for people who imagine themselves to be white, in order to have this kind of imagined solidarity, right? And so few of us have been able to break free from that lie, and even those who do have a hard time seeing what kind of community exists. And I think that's why we have to be about building the beloved community that is a multi-ethnic opportunity to embrace, the humanity that is possible for somebody who has believed that they were white. I don't know a white community that exists that could give me a kind of concrete vision of what it means to give yourself in that kind of way. But I am part of a very diverse community of people that remembers people, black, white, brown, and many other shades, who have followed this way of love and nonviolence, and that's what gives me the hope. And I do it, I do it as a Christian who knows that the way of Jesus has been followed by all sorts of people. But this isn't just for Christians. I mean, people from many faith traditions have been able to embrace this way. And so I really do think we're in pursuit of a new kind of identity, right? An identity that is better than the lie that whiteness offered somebody like me.
Please get this book, White Poverty, How Exposing Myths About Race and Class Can Reconstruct American Democracy. Dr. Barber and Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove have been on every major network. The Democrats presently are without a plan. In fact, America may very well be without a plan. And Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove has stepped forward along with Reverend William Barber, White Poverty, How Exposing Myths About Race and Class Can Reconstruct American Democracy. It's the first of its kind, and it is truly a classic book. I'd like to thank our guests, Attorney Alan Orr, Reverend Jonathan Hartgrove. I've enjoyed being with you. We send our deepest sympathy to the day and to the family of the Raw Report, Robin Ayers. God bless you and God keep you. Until next time.